Alrighty, welcome back, dudes, to the Como Reacts channel. Today we got a vid sent in from Stump. It's called Neanderthals were an absolute freak of nature. I'm guessing it's about cavemen, because that's what it kind of looks like. But anyway, let's get into it.
Of all the human species who have walked the earth, it is perhaps the Neanderthals that people are most fascinated by. Their likeness and close relationship to us has even
Bro, that ain't no Neanderthal. That's an Irish leprechaun.
led some to dub them as our sister species, and even their DNA can still be found within most of us to this day. While dates aren't clear, it is thought that this group of archaic humans inhabited parts
Put some clothes on.
of Eurasia between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago. Most of this time falls under the Cavemen stage of the Pleistocene, a time when Eurasia.
Hold on, I want to rewind and look at
Most
that
of this-
chart for a second. So, the Quaternary and the Pleistocene and the Holocene. So, it's around. Yeah, I don't know.
Time falls under the Cavemen stage of the Pleistocene, a time when Eurasia was generally even colder than it is today and filled with an abundance of megafauna that made life.
For those of you who don't understand, Eurasia is the idea of Pangea, which is Pangea was a supercontinent. So that's when all of the continents were together. And then Eurasia is kind of like when they started to kind of break apart, but Asia was its own, and then it broke apart more into more islands. I think, I'm not totally sure. I am kind of a science and history nerd, so that's what I think it is. But I know Pangea is the supercontinent they think that we all came from. So yeah.
No walk in the park. Therefore, to survive and thrive in harsh conditions, Neanderthals evolved some of the most insane biology seen in any Homo species. And if alive today,
Just to point it out, Homo species means same species. It does not mean gay species. All right, they're not gay. All right, it means Homo species means same species. All right, so inside their species.
some would most likely even consider them to be superhuman in a few senses. From afar,
Now, the reason that they were considered superhuman also has to do with the conditions that they were living in. They also had to lift like more heavy objects. Obviously, they didn't have a lot of the normal stuff that we have today. But they was they were superhumans in the sense of like they could survive in the cold with literally rags on and they're fine. And that's just due to the environment of their body changing. It's just like how we have African American people, and the reason their skin color is darker is due to the adaptation of sun in Africa because they're closer to the equator. So it's kind of the same thing as that. Like their bodies had to adapt to their environment. So
their anatomical differences to us would not be so obvious, with the likeliest contrasting feature being their height, as recovered specimens show that on average, Neanderthals were quite a bit smaller than modern humans, typically being 14 centimeters or 5.5 inches shorter than post-World War II populations. The tallest known Neanderthal specimen, dubbed Amud 1, is believed to have been about 1.78 meters or 5 foot 10 inches tall,
5'10", yeah.
which really doesn't seem that tall, all things considered. However, when comparing
I think 5'10" is actually the average height of an American right now. So yeah, I mean they were like their tallest guy was the average. They had to have been about 5'5" ish then.
Neanderthals to European populations of 20,000 years ago, we find that Neanderthals were actually equally as tall and if not slightly taller. So that's really all to say that we don't know how tall they could have been. What's fascinating though, is that despite being shorter than modern humans, Neanderthals were quite a bit heavier, with the average male having weighed up to 83 kilograms or 183 pounds, while the females usually hovered around 66 kilograms or 146 pounds, making them 20% heavier than the average Homo sapien. The reason behind this paradoxical sounding information,
There again, Homo sapien just means same species, pretty much. I think it does. But the reason that their bodies were also bigger was have to do with skeleton size, which I think they're actually about to talk about, is skeleton size because their bones were thicker due to their conditions. Because if you see a lot of like people kicking trees and stuff, what they do is they make a ton of microfractures in their bones, and their bones basically get stronger. That's why when you break a bone or whatever, they say that your bone's going to grow back stronger. It's just due to the breakage in the bone. It grows back stronger and more reinforced. So yeah.
is that Neanderthals had crazy robust skeletons that were much more compacted than our own, with virtually every single bone being thicker and heavier, with them sometimes even being twice the density. Their shoulders, femurs, chest, triceps, arms, and kneecaps were especially bulky, which are all signs that they were extremely powerful and muscular in life. and it is widely agreed upon that they were much stronger than us, a possible adaptation to their close quarter hunting tactics that involved them using giant
Environment. Again, environment. It's environmental evolution.
spears to take down medium and large sized prey, which included various rhinos, horses, elephants, and of course, woolly mammoths, which were equivalent in size to African bush elephants and sported thick coats of fur that made it that much harder to kill them. And speaking of African bush elephants, it's no secret that they're endangered just like their woolly cousins were before them when they were still around, as within just 3 generations, 50% of the global population of African bush elephants have died off. And while I love making videos about extinct animals, I would rather not have any more animals to be added to the list of potential videos.
The reason they're also going extinct is due to the ivory and the horns. Poachers will take that. Ivory's also, I know of a piano back there, it's normally used in like piano keys and stuff like that. Ivory's elephant tusks. But they would have to kill the elephant because we didn't have any sort of tranquilization stuff. It's very expensive to get on the black market, tranquilization stuff. So what they'll do is they'll just kill the elephant. I mean, a bullet's cheap, right? So it's just cost of production. But yes, I agree that we need to. I think they're a protected species now. So we have a lot in zoos, but also I think in the wild they're actually a protected species, meaning that if somebody kills them, it's big penalty. It's like 10 years in jail or something like that.
Which is why I'm really excited to be partnering with Planet Wild. Planet Wild is basically crowdfunding for nature conservation, and it operates by offering a paid membership in which funds are given to a new project partner every month. One such project that hooked me is the elephant conservation program that they're doing in Tanzania. Like the global population, Tanzania's elephant population has declined drastically since the 1970s. And now farmers have started to increasingly expand directly into both the elephant's habitat and their migration route, leading to only more elephant casualties at the hands of humans. To curb this problem, Planet Wild and their partner org, Wild Survivors, has come up with a pretty nifty solution, using teeny tiny bees to scare elephants and create a natural barrier. In a more interesting twist, instead of unleashing bees on elephants, they're actually building a bee fence, which will help to keep the elephants out of harm's way and hopefully reducing overall deaths. And this is
I don't know if his facts are totally right because he's acting like that they die of natural causes, but they die more of poachers than the natural causes for the ivory of the tusks. So I don't know if his facts are totally accurate because it sounds like how he's trying to put a spin on it, that they're naturally dying, and that's not the case. They're not just running off cliffs. They're not stupid. So I think that he's a little bit misconstruing his information, but that's just my take on that. So.
This is only one of the many projects that you can support through Planet Wild, as like I mentioned, they release new ones every month. They're also 100% transparent about how your funds are used, as they make a new video each month here on YouTube showing you how much funding was used and how the community's contributions were put to use. I of course already signed up myself because I think it's an absolutely great way for individuals to get involved in conservation. So if you want to protect Mother Nature, I highly recommend signing up. You are free to give whatever amount, big or small, as every dollar counts. And for the first 150 people that sign up, I will cover the first month. So scan the QR code on the screen, use my code EXTINCT10, or click the link in the description or pinned comment. And if for whatever reason you sign up and no longer feel like supporting, you can cancel at any time. And if you want to learn more about the project I described earlier, check out the video link in the description. This widespread and presumably lifelong use of these spears is also what some researchers partially believe led to the distinct Popeye-like arms seen in many Neanderthal specimens that would have allowed them to wield weapons with ferocious intensity. The well-defined nature of their arms and overall muscular build was possibly also a sign of extreme levels of hormones, according to at least one study.
I think that's very valid. And the reason I think it's valid is because if we look today, so there's 2 types of hormones. There's the male hormones, which are called testosterone, and there's the woman hormone called estrogen. And testosterone gives men that like stuff, but men also have estrogen in them because if we were full testosterone, we would be extremely grumpy and upset. And the reason that bodybuilders normally are upset is because they take a ton of testosterone as an extra thing to help with bulking up, because more testosterone equals more muscles. That's why women normally have to take like some sort of like CRT or something like that to be able to get bigger muscles or do bodybuilding. And it just comes down to the hormones in your body. So that's why men get bigger, is because they have more testosterone in them. So, but we've seen testosterone levels dropping pretty rapidly. Um, that's why we have a lot of shorter men, a lot of weaker men now than we used to, like say 50 years ago. So there's a lot of that. That's part of the reason why we're just kind of weak now. But yeah, that's why these guys are so strong. It just has to do with their chemical balance. So
Specifically, the researchers believe that Neanderthals were naturally pumped up with large amounts of hormones that added to their increased muscle mass and provided them with the ability to pull off some pretty crazy feats of strength, such as lugging up to 50 pounds or 27 kilograms of meat for 30 miles or 48 kilometers, the same distance as walking 138 laps around a soccer field. What's more is that thanks to their larger chests, shoulders, and triceps, scientists assume that Neanderthals would have been pretty great wrestlers and powerlifters if still around, with males possibly being able to bench press 500 pounds or 200 kilograms without training, while the females could have done 350 pounds or 160 kilos. For a little bit of
so see, that's what I'm talking about though with women. That's why they take stuff testosterone. It's that testosterone, that hormone, that really does it. And it also comes down to genetics too. He was talking about weight building a little bit. Comes down to genetics a lot with that too, because if your body naturally has more testosterone, then you're gonna naturally get stronger, easier. So yeah.
context, just 2/3 of this weight would have been considered elite levels by our own standard. Their short, bulky builds played a big role in this strength too, but it wasn't only power that they gained from their robustness, as it bestowed upon them incredible durability as well. A nice touch to complement the brutally hard lives that many Neanderthals endured. In fact, a systemic analysis on recovered skeletons found that between 79 and 94% showed signs of extreme trauma that had fully healed.
And that's what I'm talking about those microfractures that happen. People's bones fracture, and when they rebuild stronger. So yeah, they get crazy injuries, but when their bodies heal eventually, that those bones come back stronger and they're a little better. So yeah.
Injuries ranged from blunt force fractures all the way to traumatic amputations, with a particularly gruesome case involving an elderly Neanderthal, who during his younger years had lost his right arm, damaged his left clavicle, was smashed so badly in the face that he was blinded in one eye, and had ears so banged up that the ear canals themselves were shut off by new bony material that had grown after repeated injury, rendering him deaf in both ears. The high degree of damage seen in Neanderthal specimens is thought to have come from a mix of their aggressive face-to-face hunting technique, interpersonal conflicts, and animal attacks, the latter of which actually seems to have been a common occurrence, as nearly 74% of Neanderthals, based on one study, reflected evidence of having survived violent animal encounters, with 21% having been
Violent animal encounters, or he also, I think, is kind of forgetting that they also did do things like fight each other. They had tribes would fight over land because land had to do with hunting grounds, and the more animal on a certain hunting ground, the more people wanted it, thus the more violence between the tribes.
with big cats, 17% with wolves, and 36% with bears. The most hardcore part of all of this is that scientists do not think that these animal attacks were predation attempts. Rather the opposite, that the animals had been defending themselves during Neanderthal attacks. Talk about hardcore. And to really drive this home, even their skin was designed for battle, as genes found in Neanderthals are associated with thickened skin, nails, and hair that theoretically help them cope with getting banged up and enduring the cold. And yet another adaptation that seemed to benefit their rough lifestyle were large joints that allowed them to perform strenuous movement that would have been extremely hard or nearly impossible for a Homo sapien to do. And while not necessarily larger,
Listen, you want to skip this ad. I would too. But what if I told you there's a skip
Neanderthal hands were also much different from our own, with their fingertips being broader and their thumbs sticking out at a much wider angle, which
And that just comes also, like I said, down to genetics. The better genetics, the stronger your bones are half the time. It's just better genetics for your body equals things like that. So when they're reproducing with people that have the equal genetics as they do, then that's pretty much what happens. Is you just end up with freaks of nature. Like LeBron is a good example of someone that probably has good genetics. A lot of the taller people like Giannis or let's say like Embiid or someone like that, it comes down to genetics, and that's why they can do what they do at a high level. So some people think it's just, I put in all this work. No, it comes down to genetics too. A certain height, a certain weight class, a certain build, a certain amount of testosterone in your body. So that's what it also kind of equates to as well. So
which likely affected the way they gripped objects. And to some, their hand shape possibly meant a reduction in precision capabilities, which they made up for, though, by powerfully gripping their items and weapons. So clearly, Neanderthals were absolute units on the outside, but they were pretty crazy on the inside too, with one of the more obvious signs being their barreled chests, which accommodated a wider rib cage and larger lungs, with studies finding that on average, Neanderthals had a lung capacity 20% greater than our own. Yet, this number widely varies, and some exceptional Neanderthals have us beaten even.
part of that lung capacity increase also has to do with the pollution in our air now, because what happens is when you inhale air, your body oxygenates white blood cells and turns them into red blood cells. All right, and so when you have pollution in the air, that will reduce the amount of white blood cells that your lungs can grab. So say I have 4 white blood cells coming in, but I only have 3 open slots. Well, then comes through, you miss one of them. Well, this one's gone now. So it also comes down to, their lungs are healthier, so they have extra slots open now, because that's what pollution does. Pollution will block off one of those. When they have 4 slots open, the transfer is so much easier, and that leads to the bigger lung capacity.
Even more badly in this area, as best demonstrated by Kabara 2, a male whose lungs can most likely hold 9 liters of air, which is 40% greater than the capacity of the average modern man's lungs. And to make this even
Yeah, and bigger lungs too, for sure. That definitely plays a factor of it. But a lot of it also has to do with pollution too. That's how they were able to go miles and miles and miles without having to run out of air. So yeah, and just the training too. When you're brutally, running that distance, whatever, your body gets accustomed to it and you get used to it. It's like when you're running track or cross country, and for when you first start training, you feel out of breath and exhausted. But as you get better at it, and as your body gets kind of used to it, the breathing gets easier. Your lungs don't feel like they're going to explode. Things like that.
more impressive, keep in mind that until recently, the largest lung capacity ever recorded in an athlete was only 8.5 liters. Neanderthals' noses further supported this notion that they gobbled up air, as they were quite long and wide, which helped them move air faster, as in 100% faster than what's seen by any man or woman today. The need for speed, through their noses and their ridiculous lung capacity, is thought to have been an adaptation to support their heavier bodies and to help them survive in the colder climates.
That's what I've been talking about this whole time. Adaptation. It's very key in this, and I think he doesn't hit it enough.
Since animals who do live in the cold, Neanderthals included, typically evolve faster metabolic rates to compensate for the rate of heat loss that they experience. This is then, of course, reflected by their energy requirements as well. As in the case of Neanderthals, it's believed that an individual needed between 4,500 and 6,700 calories every single day. So, if they were still alive, you could expect food items to have two completely separate nutrition labels, distinguishing between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. The bulky nature of their noses seems to have helped directly with the cold as well, since more room in the nasal cavity would have helped to heat and humidify the cold, dry air that was coming in. Now, because Neanderthals breathed like champs, you may be thinking that they were exceptional long-distance runners, who could tire their prey to complete exhaustion, much like what is seen in modern humans. However, on the contrary, Neanderthals were surprisingly poor endurance animals, who were instead built for bursts of speed. And there's actually more than one biological trait that points to this. One example being their toes, which were fairly long and wide, allowing them to stay in contact with the floor for a longer period, and thus allowing them to generate more power and faster starts. Not to mention that their leg bones were quite short, something that's not usually seen in endurance athletes of today.
True, but their bodies have been adapted to running, so I don't know if that's actually an entirely true fact right there. And the reason I don't think it is because if we think about it, Native Americans are also very, very small people. Like if we look at Native Americans before the Mayflower ship came over, until Columbus came over, excuse me. And we look at the Native American species, they're also very short, yet they have crazy endurance for running because they would track animals for miles, and because that's how they hunt, that's how they eat. So I don't actually know how entirely true that is. I mean, you could say stuff like they have longer toes, but I mean, doesn't that mean that they propel themselves farther per leap, meaning that they make up for the loss of energy that they would have with smaller feet or shorter legs? They'd be able to propel themselves with a longer toe as like a push off the ground. So I don't even know how entirely true that is. I don't know.
who typically have longer legs to increase each stride. Even their Achilles tendons were not designed for distance, having been long and narrow, making them not the best at storing energy needed for longer runs.
And there again, this can also be a difference in the areas they're looking at, because Neanderthals weren't just in colder areas, because they were also in deserts and things like that. So you also have to understand that, I mean, if you're hunting, let's say like antelope, which are more like desert animals, and you're chasing them, then you're gonna have to run to track them down as food. They're not just gonna sit there. So I don't actually. I mean, yes, maybe their Achilles tendon is smaller in a certain region of species, but it doesn't make sense that they would all have that, because there had to be some endurance people that were able to do that.
And this is once again in contrary to endurance athletes, who almost always have stiff, short, and wide Achilles tendons. And yet, while their lower
And one more thing, we could also think about too the decay. These things have been underground for thousands of years. All right, so the decay in the actual muscle could make it look like that's what it is, but we don't actually fully know because they've been decaying for thousands of years. So how accurate really is that?
extremities were the most blatant signs of speed over stamina. The true proof in the pudding came from something unseen to the naked eye: their muscle fibers. As you may know, especially if you've done a 23andMe, humans have differing types of muscle fibers that each specialize in a certain level of power generation to stamina ratio. For example, someone can have a higher ratio of fast twitch or slow twitch muscle fibers, the former of which helps to generate bursts of energy, while the latter can possibly help people perform better and longer lasting activities, such as endurance running. In modern humans, these fibers are mixed, and this was also the case in Neanderthals, but they typically had a way higher concentration of these fast twitch muscle fibers than we do, a likely adaptation for their hunting style.
And that makes sense, because they're going to have to catch up to those slower animals anyway. So, think about it, or it's faster animals, excuse me. So, if they have to take off after a fast animal, of course you want to be able to take off with a burst of speed. But, excuse me, also, what happens when you're chasing a rabbit or a fast animal? You're going to have to run that half a mile to catch it. Because, I mean, think about it. When you see a deer being shot and the shot's missed, the deer takes off. And there's no shot that even you being sneaky enough to try to sneak up on as close as possible, that just one stab is going to kill a deer all the time. It's definitely possible if you stab it in the right place, but there's no shot that you're getting close enough every time to stab it in a vital organ. So I just don't see how that is extremely accurate with the not long distance thing. I think that there also were long distance because they were hunters. They had to be able to go long distances at a fast rate of speed to be able to catch up to their prey, especially if it was injured and they were tracking it. So, yeah.
Which required quick bursts of speed to get close and personal with their prey. This also means that if for whatever reason, if Neanderthals came back, be sure to challenge one to a marathon instead of a sprint, to at least give yourself the best shot of winning. All this power and speed no doubt gave them quite a lot of brawn, but interestingly enough, they were also a lot of brain as well, as they had freakishly large brain cases. On average, the male brain cases tended to be 1,640 cubic centimeters, and in the woman it was usually around 1,460 cubic centimeters, which makes them about 30% bigger than what's seen in contemporary humans.
Bigger doesn't always mean better.
Now, pure size alone does not paint the full story of intelligence, but their huge brains were a good sign that they were at least far more intelligent than first thought. And today, it's widely believed that Neanderthals could perform a whole host of complex tasks, such as coordinating hunts, making tools, creating arts, taking exceptional care of the sick, and
Who's coming in the driveway?
of course, communicating. Yet, despite the size of their brains, researchers do not necessarily think that Neanderthals had superior mental prowess compared to us.
Just because they have bigger brains doesn't mean they were better at taking care of their sick. Do you understand that their medicine back then was so basic? Like, if one of them got cancer, there's no way that their bigger brain is going to help them figure that out, okay? That's going to be figured out by cutting open a body and seeing it, all right? And even then, at that period of time, you might even not even know what that is. So that just doesn't make sense to me at all. That you can try to say that the bigger brain made them better at helping heal people. Like, no, that's not accurate at all. I mean, they might have done good at taking care of their sick, but there's no way that their medicine back then was so good. Because if so, if we look at the historical periods, there's no way that, because all our medicine in the like the early 1800 or like the early starting in the early 1800s was all trial and error medication. So that means that they would take a group of subjects and they would give it to them and they would see the reaction. And sometimes it could kill you, sometimes it could heal you. You never really know, but sometimes you didn't have a choice. So that's where it makes me think that I think a lot of it was still just trial and error. I don't think it had anything to do with they were good at medicine, but
as their brains were also structurally different than ours, having a more circular bomb-like shape that had to operate a large body, and devoted larger areas to certain senses, such
there again, this is a very rough sketch. We have no clue. We have no clue. There's no more neurons firing in their brain to be able to tell that that's how their brain was sectioned. This is a totally inaccurate fact right here because we have no clue that their brain was like that. So I don't. Yeah, this is kind of just take this with a grain of salt.
as smell and eyesight, as their occipital lobes were relatively huge, and their
Where's the proof? We don't have a brain that has neurons still firing that we can tell what each
eyesight
section
is actually what some scientists think is to blame for the massive brains, as Neanderthals also had unusually big eyes, which would have required much more brain power to process what they were seeing. Of course, though, no one has ever found an intact Neanderthal eye, but based on the size and shape of their eye sockets, it is estimated that they were about 15% larger than our own.
That could also be due to skeleton decay. We have no clue. This video is such a speculation. Like, I'm not hating on this guy for trying to make something straight up, but brother, like, you need to check your facts a little better because that could honestly just be due to bone decay. Like, we can maybe tell with this part, but their eye socket. I mean, look, you can see on the video right below me that the eyes look like they're decayed. Like that doesn't mean their eye sockets are bigger. I mean, you can maybe tell a little bit by their like this bone right here, but I mean, at the same time, how do we know that that didn't decay and they just had really thick eyebrows? Because that's the part of the adaptation to their environment. I don't know.
Which would have helped them see a lot better and sharper than we do, while also giving them better night vision. These eyes, in conjunction with their big brains and large noses, gave Neanderthals some pretty sizable heads and skulls that might have led to their sturdy thick necks, seeing that they had to be able to support such giant noggins. Furthermore, their heads, relative to ours, were not just bigger, but more elongated and forward projecting as well. And unsurprisingly, their other facial features were supersized too, including the jaw and teeth. It was originally thought that their thick wide jaws and sturdy chompers were an indication of an insane bite force that would have let them gnaw on bones, tough meat, and a variety of abrasive foods.
That is probably true, because if we also look at a little bit of African history and culture, a lot of African people eat bone, and that's why they have such strong, healthy white teeth, but they don't have to care for it as much as we do. And it also comes down again to those microfractures in the teeth. They heal because that's how the teeth are. They're a bone, just like any other bone, so they heal. But that might be the most spot on thing he said this whole video.
However, subsequent studies revealed a bite force not far from our own, with it being comparable to the bites seen in the upper range of modern humans, and would have registered at around 700 newtons. So that's to say, while it would hurt a lot to be bit, it would most likely not cause any catastrophic wounds, at least most of the time. This does call into question though, why did they have such large mouths and teeth if not for a strong bite? And one interesting idea claims that the answer is that the jaw was simply widened in order to accommodate the teeth themselves, which had essentially evolved to be a third hand.
And I think that is also pretty true in the sense of they didn't take their wisdom teeth out like we do, and I have my wisdom teeth actually still, but they didn't take their wisdom teeth out, and they probably grew because I don't think that's an evolutional thing, like this far into evolution. So, like an evolutional theory, I don't think I fully agree with the idea of evolution. I think that there was evolution, but I don't think it's what science makes it out to be. But that could be an evolutional thing because obviously, I mean, he looks like a human, so there was definitely evolution in humans once they were human form. and we can see that in different skin colors and stuff like that. But I don't entirely think that it's just because they had a wider jaw. I don't know.
To be exact, a group of researchers believe that Neanderthals would have used their teeth to grip and manipulate different items, thus freeing up both of their hands for other uses. And there is some evidence that backs this, as besides being grippy in structure and nature, Neanderthal dentition have wear and tear patterns to the front that don't really align with eating or chewing, and is only found in Neanderthals, suggesting that they bit objects with their front teeth quite a lot.
But then why didn't we still see that in future species? Because of people like this were like this up until like the 1300s, or that's what they speculate. I mean, they try to say they're millions of years old. That is so false if you look at it, because if we look at how our planet's designed, there's no way that it's 13 million years old or whatever they try to say it is. Millions. They start to say it's millions of years old. I don't think that's entirely true. And also they've said that they try to say, well, carbon dating says this. But most people don't know that carbon dating is actually not accurate only up until 2,000 years. So past 2,000 years, carbon dating is actually not very accurate. And you can look that up. So they try to make these speculations. Well, carbon dating said this. Well, it's scientifically proven that carbon dating is not accurate past a certain point. So
The bulky nature of each tooth may have also been an important part in processing their diets, which we know based on isotopic analysis consisted of large amounts of meat. So much so, in fact, that they are considered to have been hypercarnivores. In other words, 70% of their huge caloric need came from meat alone. At this point, I wouldn't blame you for thinking Neanderthals were quite funky and different compared to us. And you may be wondering what impact this has on you if you're one of the many with Neanderthal DNA. For example, if it means super strength or a voracious appetite for meat. Well, simply put, nearly every study on the matter so far has not yielded any significant results, and most maintain that Neanderthal DNA usually only has subtle effects on athletic feats and physical appearances. Although, there is a growing list of studies that suggest that their DNA may have had greater impacts on our internal systems than we once thought. That being said, many of these studies have conflicted with each other, and there is a lot of disagreement in general on just how impactful Neanderthal DNA really is.
I also think that is true. And the reason I think that's true is because I think the only reason that our internals aren't as good as they used to be is due to several things. Pollution, our processed food diet that we eat. A lot of people eat processed food. It also, I think, comes down to not eating like fresh meat. A lot of these people would actually eat raw meat, and it wouldn't be clean meat, but their stomach could handle it due to just the makeup of the stomach acid and things like that. But what has really softened and really destroyed our internals is all of that. There's the processed food, the pollution, stuff like that. So,
but what no one is in disagreement with is just how amazing these extinct humans were. Thanks for watching, and until next.
Alrighty, WVidStomp, thank you for the video submission. If you want to submit a video, please be sure to put it in the Discord server. The link for the Discord will be in the description, as well as the link to this guy's video. This guy was Extinct Zoo. I forgot to shout out the guy last time, but thank you for the video, brother. I appreciate it. Gives me something to ponder for sure. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for more reaction content like this. And don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Most importantly, leave a comment down below. If you disagree with anything that I say or disagree with anything that he says, feel free to just let me know in the comments down below. Later, dudes.